Hello, and welcome to Informatically Speaking, a Greater Delaware Valley ANIA podcast designed to promote knowledge sharing in the field of nursing informatics, locally, nationally, and globally within our unique industry. At GDV ANIA, we are committed to providing opportunities for professional development with the goal of advancing nursing informatics practice. I'm your host, Constance McLaughlin. Welcome back to our podcast series on applying the principles of influencing behaviors within our personal and professional lives. We are, of course, again, spending time with our friend Bruce Wilson, who is taking us through this journey. And we are in, I believe, episode 9, and we're going to talk about source 5.
That is correct.
Welcome back, Bruce.
Thank you, Constance. Good to be here as always. And can you believe it? We're almost at the finish line.
My gosh.
We're in session number 9. And you said correctly, today we're going to go through source 5. Just to remind everybody that what we're doing here is these tools are tools from Crucial Learning and specifically the influencer model. And all of the content can be found at cruciallearning.com or in their book Influencer. They have, as I've mentioned several times, they have robust training and courses, but we're just here talking a little bit in a podcast about those things. So thanks for being here. We are going to talk about source 5, and just to remind everybody, we started off with our clarified measurable result, right, Constance?
Yes.
And then we moved to what?
Vital behaviors.
Vital behaviors. That's right.
I got the right answer.
You did. You're on your toes. And then we moved into the sources of influences. So we've done sources 1, 2, 3, and 4 up until this point. And Constance, let's remind everybody, people do things for 2 reasons: because they
can and because they want to.
That's right. Yes. Correctly. And so the model refers to those things as motivation and ability. And so source 5 is all about what we call structural motivation. And structural motivation is really what I call, and this is my joke, but I have to identify my jokes because I'm not that funny. I call this human thinking 1.0, meaning, or sometimes the carrot and the stick. We almost often always go to, if we need so-and-so to do this thing, let's move to incentive. And in fact, not to pick on you, Constance, if we rewound and go back and listen to the first one of these series, you'd brought up, let's, moved into some kind of incentive. I remember I made a note of that, and you kind of had said that when we were talking about your influencer challenging with the dishwashers, like, let's offer an incentive to do this. In fact, and that's really where most people go. But it's interesting because the authors, and this is what I want to point out to everybody, if you don't have the model in front of you, maybe you can Google it, or just think of these as 6 boxes together that are in a rectangle, but the rectangle's vertical. So just think of them as six boxes stacked on top of one another. And they put source 5 at the bottom, structural, and it's 5th in their series. And they do that for a reason. And so today we're going to learn 3 strategies in this source 5, or this structural motivation area. And these strategies are going to help you navigate key things that you know about. So we have source 5 around us all day, every day. These are things like your pay, perks, promotions, performance appraisals, discipline. And so these things are around us in our job all the time. But again, we want to go to this source as humans right out of the gate. And the author would say, well, hold on, you don't want to do that. You want to actually go to it, what we call a third. And that's our first strategy. So within the source 5 strategies, the first strategy is what we call use rewards third and in moderation. So if we're lumping structural motivation into this notion of rewards, using it third and in moderation, what might you think that would be, Constance?
Rewards? Well, Wait, say that a different way.
Sure. Any of those rewards that I just mentioned, and it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be limited to those, but pay, perks, performance appraisals, discipline, um, you know, maybe something you might be familiar with, night on the town, those kind of things.
Right.
So the author's saying they're calling those rewards, okay, or perks. And so their first strategy for navigating source five is what we call using rewards third and in moderation. And I'm asking you, what do you think they mean by that?
Well, make it not be your first go-to,
Okay. What would be
right?
your first go-to?
Well, I would, I think I would rather have the person or the recipient of this have it be their own thought, like have it be their own idea, and that they would want to do that.
Okay. Not a bad answer. What that statement actually means is if we think about our model, and again, I know the listeners are maybe somewhat handicapped if they don't have it in front of them. We said people do things for two reasons, because they
Mhm.
want to and they can. And so for those listening, I want you to imagine these six boxes. On the very top of these boxes are motivation on the left and ability on the right, meaning I want to and I can. And then down the left-hand side, we've already been through personal motivation and ability. This middle row of the boxes is what we call the social. We talked about that in the last one, social motivation and ability. And then the bottom row of the box or the base is what they call structural. And so using it third, meaning moving through that model, don't use one of the other two tiers, personal or
Mhm.
social, first. So first or second, and then and only then use any kind of incentive or reward third,
Okay.
because your ability to influence the human behavior will be exponentially or more exponential or greater than just trying to go use the carrot and the stick, right? If I can tie that change to some intrinsic value to you, it's going to be far more impactful and meaningful than if I just say, "Oh, give you the reward." Let me give you an example of how we might see this. When back in the days in CPOE, real life scenario, we wanted providers to chart in the EMR. And so one of my clients said, "Hey, I'm going to give out iPads for providers that chart in the EMR." And they did that. So they bought all these. This is when the iPad was new and a new hip thing. So they bought all these providers iPad, but uh, they they decided that, okay, wait a minute, we didn't do anything to tie this back to intrinsic motivation for them. And we certainly didn't tie it to the vital behavior, which we'll talk about next. And so therefore, they just quit using the iPad and it became something to collect on their desk. And so you can't go directly to like the big thing. Another scenario would be moderation, being if the reward that you're giving out, let's say they decided to give out the iPad and 25,000, and they're like, we're only going to give the rewards to providers that chart 100% or 90% in the EMR, and everybody would have been competing. And the minute that people start arguing over the prize that you're giving out versus the thing that you're trying to accomplish, then
Right.
you're not using it in moderation. And you, as a person trying to influence the behavior, that should be a dead giveaway to you. Like, wait a minute, moderation means not in excess. So that's the first strategy. The second strategy, Constance, I kind of talked about, is linking rewards to vital behaviors. And this is one we see in healthcare all the time. And I'm going to tell you about a scenario here in a second. But first, if we don't link the reward, whatever it is that we're giving, to the vital behavior, people often will do a behavior, but the wrong behavior. And one of my favorite stories here is, do you remember the Pizza Hut Book It program? Do you remember that? Are you
Mm,
familiar with that?
you have
It
to
may
remind
not have
me.
been in your area. So Pizza Hut, a long time ago, probably 20 years ago, 15 years ago, came out with this notion of, if kids will read 5 books a month, I think it was a month, but it was either a week or a month, whatever the defined period was, I think it was a month, that they would give them a coupon for a free pizza, and that they had to validate that the books were read. And what they left out was the key fact. The vital behavior they wanted wasn't kids to read the books. The vital behavior was for kids to read the appropriate grade level books. So they were getting people that were in the 5th, 6th, and 7th grade reading kindergarten books or kids books in the 1st grade that were almost pictorial books, validating they were reading them, and then getting the pizza. So they got a behavior, but it wasn't the vital behavior. And remember, we said from our model, it's the vital behavior that causes the change to occur.
Right.
So if you don't link the reward to the vital behavior, then you're not getting the outcome. Now let's roll that forward to healthcare. Anywhere in healthcare that you think you might see that?
You're making me think again. Off the top of my head, I can't think of one.
Constance, the best place to hide things is in plain sight. That's what they say.
No kidding.
So how about this? Would you agree that the majority of physicians, now and this is shifting, but the majority of the physicians in the US are paid for tests and procedures they perform and not keeping their patients healthy?
Right.
So we're linking the reward to doing the test.
Yes.
Versus what the really outcome we're really trying to do is keep people healthy. That's a whole, and I think any provider would say that. But we get caught up in the system and everything else. And so we're not using the reward and linking it to the vital behavior. And so, okay. And then the third one, let's talk about this one. This one's one of my faves from a strategy perspective because it gets misused all the time. The third one is using rewards that reward. Now, here's a question to you. Have you ever got a Starbucks gift card?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you like Starbucks?
Well, actually, not really, but
okay. Why not?
I think it's overrated now. It's just
okay.
Okay,
so not a fan. Sometimes I ask that question and people are like, "Oh, I love Starbucks because I drink coffee." But a lot of times people say, "Oh, well, we want people to do fill in the blank, fill out the form, be on time, participate in governance, enter the order in CPA, whatever it may be. And we'll just give them a gift card for that." Starbucks is around everybody. Let's get Starbucks. Well, that's great if the person you're giving it to likes Starbucks or values it. But if they don't value it, then the reward means nothing to them. And to the giver, that sometimes loses its focus altogether. Like, oh, wait a minute. They didn't value these at all.
Right.
And so we can't forget about that. And that's really it. Like this Source 5 is very simple. It's not very complex. It really has 3 simple strategies. I'm going to talk about them again. Use rewards third in moderation, link rewards to vital behaviors, and use rewards that reward. So let's go back to my scenario, because I always like to close out these podcasts with doing a real life scenario, and we'll look at mine and then we'll maybe look at yours. So for my influence challenge, to remind everybody, it was around getting nurses to enter vitals at the bedside. And we talked about there was a struggle for them. They, after diagnosis, we learned that it wasn't because they didn't want to, but because they had, a lot of 6 logins, and that was preventing them from logging in. And so we're like, we have to make sure we use Source 5. So this particular clinic had this thing, what we called fish card. It was basically a fish sticker. And it was like a Post-it note sticker that looked like a fish. And they wanted to, the people that work there actually wanted to collect them. They collected them and they put them on their monitors and at their workstation to kind of brag like, hey, I got a fish sticker from doing a good job. So what we said is, hey, every time we see a nurse, or not we, like not leadership, but every time a peer sees another nurse putting an order in using the Vitals Smart device or at the bedside, then another peer can recognize them by giving them a sticker. And it wasn't too long before they started giving these stickers out, almost just like cash. And people were going crazy and trying to making sure they got the order, and that people saw them and they were celebrating like, hey, look at me. I'm putting it in. Oh, give me my fish sticker. And then when they would do their daily huddle, they would actually count up to see who got the most fish stickers and win. So they made it a competition amongst themselves, but we did a really good job of linking the fish sticker to the vital behavior. And so that's how we use Source 5 in that initiative. So let's come back to yours and say, how might you use a Source 5 in your dishwasher challenge.
Oh my goodness. So
Or
just,
maybe not. Can you? What are your
yeah,
thoughts?
I don't know. I have to think about it. I'll remind the listeners though that my challenge was to get my son to clean up after himself and put his dishes in the dishwasher once he's finished. And we've talked about all kinds of ways that we could socially influence him to do that, or at least help him to get toward his vital behavior. And last time I actually asked him, I think the last time we met, last time we met, Bruce, I told you I asked him and he shrugged his shoulders and he said, I don't know.
Yep.
So he doesn't know why he doesn't just clean up after himself. And I think it's just because he's 17 years old. It's just how it works. Um, but I think, you know, I could leave a little treat there by the dishwasher if he were to put his stuff away. But I would I would think that he would more often than not sneak and grab that treat and still not put his stuff in the dishwasher anyway. I don't know what I could use. Um,
Remember back to think about this. I'm going to give you a little bit of a nugget. I said source five in the beginning are things like pay, perks, performance appraisals, discipline. Those are all forms of source five. And depending upon how things operate, if there's any disciplinary action, like you're going to be grounded, you're going to lose your car, you're going to lose your phone, anything like that, that could be, not suggesting that you do those things. I'm just saying those could be source five when if you want to. And as parents, I'll just say as a parent, source five, if we really think about the framework we operate in, is especially when we're angry, we automatically run to source five as the remedy for changing the behavior. And again, if we just take a pause and be like, wait a minute, sometimes that's appropriate. I'm not saying it's not, but oftentimes we may think, I might want to use that one third and in moderation. What else can I do first? But discipline is certainly a form of source five, and one that I would think could potentially be applicable to your salute or situation if you were so inclined.
Yeah, maybe. That's just not me. That's just not me. I
Yep.
would give him the hairy eyeball
There you
before
go.
any of that happened, or say, hey, you have a treat if you do it right every day. To follow through. Maybe that would be an influence. I don't know. I'll have to try different things, but he's touch and go. Sometimes he just does it, and I always make sure I say thank you because I can hear him
Yeah, for sure.
doing it. I always make sure I say thank you so much for doing that. Um, but yeah, there's still the times where I hear it clink in the sink, and I'll turn my head, and as soon as I turn my head, he picks it up and he puts it in the dishwasher.
Oh, no kidding.
I said, why don't you just do it without? Yes, you're just trying to get a rise out of me, aren't you?
Probably says yes.
Because we were so short with the other one, we're going to dive right into the next source. And we're not even going to make you log in again. This is going to be a bonus. And we're going to give you two for the price of one. So we're going to dive into source 6 with Bruce and influencing influencing behaviors. And we're going to talk about harnessing the power of the environment to help us do that.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Constance, I think it's fantastic that we're kind of going to do a bonus plan here. And you know what? This happens to be my favorite source. They, the cliche, they save the best for last. And in my opinion, this is really that source. And people always say, really, source 6 is your favorite? I said, yeah, because it's really all about the environment. And I call it the blind source. It's the source that we don't see, but it's constantly around us. And for those that are really interested in the academics side of things like me, this is really what we call the science of propinquity. And it's how does the environment influence your behavior? And so let's dive right in. The authors would tell you the biggest problem is we are blind to the incessant and powerful force of the environment and what it exerts on our behavior. And so the solution then is to actually understand how the environment is impacting your behavior, and then using it to your benefit. And I'm going to open, Constance, with a simple, and I've said this, I think, maybe in early on when I was giving a summary, but I'm going to say it again. I'm going to start with a simple example of how powerful the environment is that you, and I know you're going to be able to answer. And then for those listening, as you're listening along, play along and see if you can maybe finish my sentence as well. Imagine you go into a restaurant for a nice dinner, and you're there, and you have to leave your guest and go to the restroom. And then while you're in the restroom, you're standing in front of the mirror and ready to leave, and you see a sign. And on the sign, it reads, "All employees must," and finish the sentence.
Wash hands before returning to work.
Yeah, all employees must wash hands. And that is a cue, what we call a cue, and we're going to learn about that particular strategy here in a second, to get somebody to wash their hands. And so the environment is very, very powerful. So let's take a look at the first strategy. And this is what we call the power of space. And this is really things like, how does my environment allow me to work efficiently or not work efficiently? How does the environment impact simple things like, for instance, there's numerous studies done to show that people that eat with smaller plates take smaller portions and have less calorie consumption.
Right.
That is a classic example of using the power of space. And we want to be really aware of how this happens. One of my favorite studies was done by an airway company. I won't mention them, and they really struggled to get workers to fill up the cargo boxes. And in fact, the cargo boxes, these wooden cargo boxes, were going out on the plane 50, 60, 70% full. So there's still a lot of room left in there. And it basically was equating to a lot of environmental impact, because they were using more fuel for more flights. They weren't making as much profit or weren't as efficient as possible. And so they were trying to figure out, what can we do to get people to fill this box? What do you think they did? What they did was actually quite genius. And when I first read about this study, I thought to myself, how simple, but how genius. They simply drew a red line on the side of the box. They required that they go through and paint a red line on the side of the box, and they wrote the words underneath the red line, "Fill to here." And when the humans had the cue, right, they were able to fill the line up.
Wow.
Fill the study up, or fill the box up. So, and that's really more, that one can be blended around more the second strategy, datas and cues, when I get into that in just a second. But that environmental component really has a big impact. Let me kind of share with you something else you probably see in your day-to-day, and I'll share this story with you. You see, it's all about, you got to think about the environment you're in and the environment your people are in, and what are they seeing? I was working with a hospital once, and they were moving to a clinically driven revenue cycle. I was working with the revenue cycle VP. I was working with the schedulers, the people on the front end, and they were really loving the system. They were loving the process. In fact, they became a spokesperson for us and did some, obviously, other client visits. And then they spoke at our annual conference about this. Big success. We were obviously having a lot of success here. But one day I get a phone call from their chief operating officer, and he was very angry with me. And he's like, "Hey, this isn't going well. I've got other system CFOs telling me they're not to do clinically driven revenue cycle. They can't get their AR days are spiking. They can't get bills out the door." And I'm thinking to myself, what is going on? Here I have one group of individuals who love it, and the other group in the same health system that not loving it. So, like the ninja that I am, I'm like, wait a minute, how is the environment impacting me? And it's all about the data. In other words, the people on the front end that were scheduling people, it was more efficient. Their job was faster. They could do coding quicker. All of those things were good because that's the environment they were in, right? But the things that were important to the executives, like the financial statements, the AR days, the business metrics, they were off. And they weren't off. They were just lagging in this particular case, but to them, they were off. And so again, the environment, that the things that they were seeing and interacting with was forming their behavior and their perceptions. And so always be aware of that. So that's what we call strategy number one, the use of the power in space. The next one, the next strategy for the art of propinquity here is what we call the power of data and cues. So this is basically the visual directions I talked about with all employees must wash their hands in the side of the box, placing reminders in key spots and locations. My wife and I use this all the time. If we're talking about something, we're like, oh, tomorrow I need to remember this thing. We're so trained now that if we say that to one another, we'll see who erase it is to go grab the sticky note and put it on the front door. Because we know if we don't use, and again, in our favor, and like these are real tools, so we might as well use them to our benefit if we don't run to the door and write the sticky note on the door before we leave, because we know we're going to leave. And we've all probably done this, like, oh, I'm going to set my keys here so I remember this thing, or I'm going to, make myself a note. I'll write on my skin, which is kind of a childish example, but we've all learned to use this notion of what we call the power of data and cues. Can you think anywhere that you, in your organization today, that you see this strategy enacted?
Some kind of a visual cue.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have alerts.
Or data, like data that drive, like a data report that maybe drive behavior, that kind of thing.
Well, within any HR, there are alerts that pop up to remind people to do things, or tasks that hit a list that remind people to do certain things, like take their vital signs.
Yep. How about alarms?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Alarms on heart monitors and pulse oximeters.
Yep. That is the environment in action, channeling or directing a behavior for sure. Some might refer to that as a nudge. Yes. So anytime that you want to, influence a vital behavior, signage, reports, listing out goals and values. Those are all examples of strategy number two. And then the third strategy I want to talk to you about is what we call the use of power or tools. So this is going to be things like mechanizing difficult work, changing the reporting structure in your organization, reorganizing the workflow, or updating instruction manuals, policies, and procedures. So these are all going to be the kind of use of power and tools. And one of the ones that I love under this strategy, and it's right directly in the healthcare industry, and I think probably one that every nurse can relate to, and every computer user can certainly relate to. I'll give you two examples. The oxygen sensor I don't know if you know this or not, but back in the day, the oxygen sensor, you know how when you go to plug in oxygen, you've got to line it up correctly, like the plug-in, you know what I'm talking about? And that didn't used to be that way. Like you could just normally plug in. So what was happening is in the hospital, people were plugging the oxygen into the wrong outlet. They were getting a different type of gas than oxygen.
Gotcha.
And so the fitting wasn't fitting correctly. So the manufacturer's like, oh, we have to change that. We have to, make this, we have to change the environmental impact. And then another example of that is USBs, when they first came out, like the USB 1.0 version, it was, you could put the USB in either side, and the data exchange strips weren't lining up. And so the manufacturer's like, oh, wait a minute, we've got to change the environment. We've got to change. So they put the block in the USB. So now you could, when you go to put it in, if you don't have it the right side, then that ensures that you're
that's why.
Yeah. So they mechanized the work. Another example of that would be, if, you've got, now I know nurses would never do this, never ever do this, but if you've got nurses that maybe, I don't know, hide beds or hide monitors and stuff that they like to use, tools and equipment they like to use. And I see you laughing on the screen because you're like, man, I'm guilty of that myself.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so that's a behavior that you don't want, right? You want visibility into those things. And so you might try to make that kind of thing difficult to do by maybe making your closets clear, or if you want to make it easy for them to have access, maybe you staff one over on each floor. I know there's just an element of making things that are difficult easy through a mechanical process, and it's difficult for them to go find a bunch of that equipment. So maybe again, like you overstaff or make the closets and stuff clear so they can see, is it something in there I can go get? Don't make it hard for them to go do. Another thing that I want to talk about with this one, because we see this a lot too, and this is a really good segue into my challenge, is really reorganize the workflow. So a lot of times you ask somebody, well, why do you do it that way? And what may be an answer that you get, Constance? Like, why are you doing your work that way?
Oh, because it's easier.
It's easier, or have you heard we've always done it that way?
Oh, yeah.
Things like that. And so what we want to challenge you with this is, if we're really trying to influence the right behavior, make it easy to do the right behavior. And so sometimes that may be reorganizing the workflow, reorganizing the time of when a meeting is, um, uh, maybe updating your policies in such a way that they no longer have to do the bureaucratic hurdle that they feel like, oh, well, I know I'm supposed to really do these things for regulatory purposes, but man, ain't nobody got time for that. And so they're like, wait a minute, if I didn't have to fill in the blank. And in my case, when we talked about the workflow, let's go back to my challenge. Remember, I said the nurses, when I asked them, why are you doing what you're doing? And they said, well, I don't have you logged into our system, and I have to put in 6 logins. They just said they didn't have time for that. Right. So this was a really good opportunity for us to use this strategy, where we said, let's actually reorganize the workflow, and the solution is going to be such that you have to go from 6 logins to 1. But your new workflow is going to be like this, which is, you've heard me say, scan the badge, scan the wristband, and hit the patient wristband and hit the send button. That's your new workflow. So the redesign of that workflow, again, the environment made it very easy for them to make that switch. And so we always want to be conscious of that. So I'm going to pause there. Finally, I'm going to ask you, how do you think this notion of propinquity, or the environment, or to use the terms from Influencer, what we would call structural ability, how do you think this might be something you utilize in your challenge?
Well, I guess the first thing I was thinking about was the environment, and yes, giving him a cue, or cluing him in to what the cue would be. Because I'm not going to hang a sign in my kitchen that says, clean up after yourself, your mother doesn't work here. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell him that when the sink is empty, you need to use. So I want to give him a cue that the environment is clean. Don't drop your stuff in the sink. It's empty. Make sure you use the dishwasher. So I want to try that, see if that works.
Well, Constance, I saved up a gem for you for last, because truth be known, we had the same challenge at my house, but with my daughters, and we remedied it. And I'm going to tell you what we did. And remember, when we first started out, I told you, hey, I'm pretty sure we can solve that for you. Okay. But I had to wait until we got to source 6 to kind of do the big reveal. And so it comes in twofold. We use social influence, which we talked about last week, but I couldn't let the cat out of the bag per se until I got this one. But the big one, and it's a sign that we have, and it says open for business. And so if the dishwasher is open for business, meaning we know it's empty, then you go. And then what we would say as parents, if we saw our kids deviating and we knew it didn't need to be unloaded, right? We weren't asking you to unload it. We would have just shout out, open for business. Or I'd have fun with my wife and say, hey, Michelle, you think that's open for business? Yeah, oh yeah, it is open for business. Look at that. We would do a little bit of banter, but we had that slogan we said verbally, social influence. And then we put the slogan on the dishwasher, open for business if it was open. So we'd have to change it out. Once we unloaded it, we would make sure we'd grab it and make sure that it was on the dishwasher. And sure enough, every time that the person sees it's open, their behavior starts to become hardwired. If it's open for business, I put it in the dishwasher.
I want to do that.
You should try.
I'm so doing that.
See, you're welcome. I don't even charge extra for these things.
Because you know what? He has one of those signs on his door.
Does he?
I'm going to take that sign off of his bedroom door and put it on the dishwasher.
Open for business.
I'm doing it.
Excellent.
Thanks, Bruce. See,
you're welcome.
I had to get through 10 of these podcasts and 6 sources of influences to tell me what to do with my kid.
I had to make you painstakingly listen through all of it.
No, I think it's awesome because we're using healthcare examples, we're using real life examples, things that we see all the time, like the signs in the bathroom. I mean, you see them, right? I mean, you walk by them, you see them all the time, and you think, I wonder if the employees even see them, and they really do wash their hands every time.
They see them. They see them. And the other thing we did is, and I think I shared this with you, but this is another good use of Source 6 in my Influencer Challenge, is this particular organization was a relatively smaller hospital, but it was really the primary care in their in their community, and it was a more rural community, and they so they are all closely connected, and one of their key reasons or value objectives for going down this path was to reduce sepsis, and I kind of shared that with you guys in the beginning. And so they came up with signs that they put in the area, and if I'm not mistaken, the signs, they didn't read this verbatim, it was pretty close to reduce sepsis, we are family, something along those lines. And so everybody saw the sign. They knew that they knew and understood what their role in it was. And that wasn't just just with the vital signs, but it was throughout their entire EMR project. So that was for everybody. So that sign was a constant cue and reminder that everybody played a role in it. And that entering the vitals was the first intake of that process.
That's awesome. I like that story.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. So that wraps it up for us.
We made it.
Oh my gosh. Well, you know what? It is a journey, and it's something that you have to think about all the time. But I will tell you that I learned this with you years ago, and going through this again reminded me of all of those things that I could be doing every day, or things that I could be doing with my team, or things that to help myself, to remind myself of things. And I actually used the word influencer today and yesterday, by the way, because it's so fresh in my mind. So I really hope that the listeners are taking this to heart, that you can go back and listen to the first one or the 5th one, or whichever one that you feel like you need to have reinforcement, to really pull all of these together and use this in your daily life, because it really does work.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. It's been my pleasure to be here and to go through this with you, and I wish you the best.
Thanks. This was awesome, Bruce. Thanks so much. Hope you come back again with us.
Sure, you bet.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you'll join us again for another session of Informatically Speaking.
This has been a production of the Greater Delaware Valley chapter of the American Nursing Informatics Association. For more information about the GDV-ANIA chapter, visit us at community.ania.org/Greater Delaware Valley/home.